The day my husband killed me to prove my truth, I was upset. He looked disgusted, but put away his sword. Since you gave birth to an immortal fetus, I will not kill you. Only then did I realize that my husband was a god from heaven. My husband hated my meanness and imprisoned me in heaven, ignoring me. The child I gave birth to after many dangerous experiences hated me for being a lowly mortal and demanded a new mother. Later, I jumped into the devil's abyss and forgot everything in the past. One day, I accompanied my daughter to experience the tribulation in the mortal world. But there was a little fairy in brocade robes staring at me with tears in his eyes. Is it because of her that my mother doesn't want me anymore? 1. The day I left the ninth heaven was Daniel's 100th birthday party. For gods, this age is still a child who has not grown up. It looks like a 10-year-old child in the human world. The entire heaven was celebrating. Even in the most remote corner of my heaven, I can hear the music. The fairy maid was arrogant and threw a plain skirt in front of me. Your Majesty has granted you special permission to take a look at the young master at the banquet. Daniel was taken away by Matthew as soon as he was born. In the past 100 years, I have only seen him a few times. I picked up the dress under the fairy maid's contemptuous gaze. She whispered, "After all these years, you still have the evil intention to seduce me, Your Majesty. Everyone in heaven and earth knows it. 100 years ago, the immortal Matthew returned from the human world after surviving a catastrophe and brought back a pregnant mortal woman. When Olivia, the saint of the flower realm, learned about this, she left in shame and anger. Matthew is well known in the heaven for being aloof and reserved. Deeply in love with Olivia, the fairies guessed that it must be that shameless mortal woman who is trying to use her son to gain power and become an immortal in one step. However, this ruined the destined marriage between Matthew and the saint. So hateful. 2. The celestial music was faint and the banquet was in full swing. I dressed up as a fairy maid, lowered my head, and served the wine with a humble look. This is the opportunity Matthew gave me to take a look at Daniel. During the banquet, someone suddenly took the wine from my hand in a frivolous manner. He laughed drunkenly. I see that this fairy maid has some similarities with that woman in her features. That experience of suffering in the human world was a taboo for Matthew. As soon as these words were spoken, all the immortals fell silent. Only Matthew remained motionless. Paul, be careful what you say. No matter what, she is Daniel's biological mother. Daniel has been very happy today. Hearing this, he started crying. Daniel doesn't want her to be his mother. Daniel wants Aunt Olivia to be his mother. Olivia held him in her arms, looked at me pitifully. My little son is crying in front of me, but I am not moved at all. The immortals were in an uproar. Countless condemning glances came from all directions. Daniel pointed at me with tears in his eyes. Father doesn't like you, and Daniel doesn't like you either. Go! The banquet has turned into a mess. I stood there blankly, my mind going blank. The last time I met Daniel was decades ago. Same as today. He was on a high platform, surrounded by immortals. I disappeared into the crowd and took a quick glance. At that time, he had just learned to speak. He babbled and called out Mom. How ridiculous. Just one word, Mother, makes me willing to be trapped in heaven. Right at this moment, Matthew raised his eyes and scolded coldly. Stay away. 3. Retreat? Retreat to where? He was going to imprison me in that desolate enchantment again. Are you going to let me continue to live like this without seeing the sun? I don't want it. I ran out in panic. However, he was forced back to the place where the sea of clouds met by the guards who rushed over. I looked up stubbornly. Let me go back to the human world. Matthew looked strange. It seems like pity, but also like mockery. Emily, you are so naive. During the time you have been in heaven, the world has undergone tremendous changes. Your relatives and friends have died countless times in reincarnation. Do you think there is someone waiting for you? I said hoarsely, yes. Matthew was stunned for a moment. Who? The scholar next door? He died a long time ago. His bones have all turned to ashes. He laughed out of anger. I knew you still had feelings for him. You finally admitted it. Scholar? I wondered blankly, who is the scholar? But I still said, yes. In his shocked eyes, I closed my eyes and jumped down. I was wounded and bleeding from the strong wind that was rushing through the clouds. The wind was howling, and there was an endless fall below. Then, I stalled at a certain altitude. Someone screamed in my ear. My eyelids were covered with blood. I don't know where I am. Only a clear voice could be heard, like a very young girl. Daddy said that we can't pick up men on the street. She sounded hesitant. That woman. I think I can pick it up, right? The little girl repeated it in a gibberish. It's like he's made some kind of decision. Well, pick her up and make her my mother. 4. Time flies, and 100 years pass in the blink of an eye. The day Isabella went to the human world to transcend the tribulation of transformation. I am more anxious than she is. The little girl was born with congenital defects and inherited her father's inhuman body. 100 years have passed, but only a virtual shape has been condensed. If the wind in the demon abyss is a little stronger, it will be able to blow her away. Don't worry, Isabella, I have already calculated this trip. I turned and looked at the man beside me. His expression was hidden behind the silver mask and could not be seen clearly. A very good omen. I looked at him intently. What about you? Brian is my husband. The ghost of Brian was named Brian. He, like Isabella, is a collection of shadows. In a few days, it would be the day for him to go into seclusion and break through. Brian laughed lightly. He wanted to touch my hair. Suddenly I realized that I was not a physical entity. He extended his hand halfway and paused awkwardly. I took a look, stood on tiptoe, and put my head closer. It's all right, husband. I smiled with my eyes curved. Of course I won't laugh at you. Like when I fell and broke my brain and couldn't remember anything. He doesn't dislike me either. Since they are husband and wife, they naturally need to take care of each other. As I said that, I took a big sip of Brian in front of me. The human couples I saw in the water mirror express their love in this way. But I narrowed my eyes and looked at his suspicious ears. Are you shy? TSK, you are already an old married couple. Take off your mask and let me see your blushing face. Brian stepped back subconsciously. I muttered quietly, stingy guy. Having said that, I haven't seen his face in all these years. After a while, I finally heard his low voice. I'm ugly. Brian lowered his eyelashes. I couldn't see his expression clearly, but I felt that he was sad. After thinking about it, I told him seriously. I'm curious, but I care more about you than that. It's just a human skin. If you don't want to, I won't ask anymore. Brian's eyelashes fluttered slightly. It's not that I don't want to. He suddenly changed his tone, his eyes deep. When I come out of seclusion, I will show it to you, okay? 5. Brian was in seclusion, so I decided to go to the mortal world to accompany Isabella. Isabella's identity in this life is the young lady of the Brown family in Jinling. The Browns are a peculiar clan. It is said that there was a girl named Brown who married an immortal and gave birth to a son. His son has protected the Brown family for 100 years, and a tablet of his spirit is enshrined in the ancestral hall. Yushua's cute little ball is growing up day by day. I couldn't take my eyes away. I don't know why, during all these years in the demon abyss, Isabella always maintained the appearance of a little girl and never grew up. This ordeal has fulfilled my wish. Isabella was 7 years old. Due to the negligence of the servants, she got lost in the busy city. That was the first time I showed myself. Isabella wasn't afraid at all. He stretched out his chubby little hand that looked like a lotus root node towards me, smiled foolishly. I want a hug. I hugged my little girl tightly. The little body in my arms was soft and warm, not an illusion. I took her back to the Browns. When she was about to leave, she seemed to sense something. He grabbed my sleeve tightly. Fairy sister. Her eyes sparkled. Will you come visit me again? Like before. Before? In the gap between my stunned. Isabella smiled with her eyes curved. I know. Sister Fairy is always here. As she spoke, she counted on her fingers carefully. A sweet cake that appears by your bed when you are sad. A sudden cool breeze when you can't sleep in the hot summer. Besides, she pulled the red string around her neck and showed me the amulet. I once stole what her wet nurse made for her. I imitated the style and made an identical one and returned it. Unexpectedly, she still found out. Is it too ugly? Seeing that I was a little annoyed, Isabella hugged my neck. The amulet has your scent on it. It smells so good. Strangely, at that moment, I suddenly felt a headache. A strange picture appeared in my mind. I knelt on the ground blankly, holding a dirty amulet in my hand. There was a fairy in feathered clothes with a look of disgust in her eyes. If you look at this kind of clumsy stuff any longer, it will only make your eyes dirty. Young master asked me to tell you. A mortal's talisman cannot protect a god. He doesn't take out the trash. Not even a lowly mortal mother. What is she talking about? Why can't I understand a word of it? I suddenly began to tremble uncontrollably. Isabella was startled. Stick to me and hug me hard. Are you cold? Isabella is very warm. You won't feel cold if you hug her. 6. After being discovered by Isabella, I no longer hide myself, and when no one is around, I appear to meet her. She was a little surprised when she learned my name. Emily. She looked at the words on the rice paper. He bit the tip of the pen and wrote his name stroke by stroke. Isabella Brown. When the two names were lined up, Isabella's eyes lit up. Fairy sister, so we are from the same family? This new discovery made her shake her head with joy. I didn't argue, I just laughed. I have long forgotten where this name Brown came from. Ever since I fell on my head 100 years ago, I have completely forgotten the past. Brian said, it's better to forget it. I stopped pursuing it. Isabella's 15-year-old coming-of-age party. According to Brown family custom, they would burn incense and offer sacrifices to the immortal, seeking his protection. There was no wind in the temple. When the incense in Isabella's hand went out for the third time, everyone's expression changed. The white-haired elder pointed at her tremblingly. This woman is despised by the immortals and is an unlucky person. As he said, outside the ancestral hall, a strong wind suddenly blew. A flock of crows flapped their wings and hit the window frame. A few of them broke through the window screens and circled in the ancestral hall. God, please calm down. Isabella was pushed by several men and forced to kneel on the ground to atone for her sins. She yelled angrily. Where did this demon come from, pretending to be a ghost? Get out. The clan elder was horrified and raised his cane to hit her. This is what I saw when I came. A stream of spiritual energy shot out. Those who were suppressing Isabella were immediately knocked away. Isabella stood up in surprise and tried to find my location. The next moment, the strong wind died down. There was a bright white light in the ancestral hall. A little fairy in brocade clothes and jade belt grabbed Isabella's neck. Full of gloom. Why do you have the scent of my mother? 7. The little fairy has white teeth and red lips, and looks like a boy of 17 or 18 years old. He soon discovered where the aura came from. When he raised his hand again, the red line on Isabella's neck broke. He lowered his eyes and looked at the amulet in his palm. He looked somewhat bewildered. Seeing this, Isabella didn't care about anything else and rushed forward to grab it fiercely. "Give it back to me." The young man gritted his teeth in hatred, and with his 5 fingers forming claws, he fiercely grabbed Isabella's neck. "This is my mother's stuff. Why should I give it back to you?" "Kara." A very light sound. He lowered his head slowly, and the sharp tip of the sword pierced his chest. Isabella took the opportunity to break free. Warm blood flowed down the hilt of the sword and all over my hands. The next moment, the hole began to heal visibly. He is indeed a little god. Thinking of this, he stabbed the sword in his hand deeper. "That's Isabella's." I raised my eyes and said indifferently, "Give it back to her." The wind blew the white veil under my hood. The boy looked into my eyes in disbelief. He didn't return it. He didn't back off either. Facing the sword tip, he took a step forward. After a while, seeing that I didn't react, there was mist in his pupils. He bit his lip and was about to cry. "I don't," he said angrily. "Mother, why did you help her? Why don't you want me? Do you know that ever since you left, they have been laughing at me for not having a mother? It's all your fault. You have to come back with me. Where did this wild child come from?" I frowned and put away my sword. "You scared Isabella. Also, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not your mother." Having said that, he snatched the amulet back swiftly. Isabella turned pale with fear. "What?" He still stood in front of me and looked at the boy warily. The young man covered the bloody hole in his chest and laughed in anger. "Mother, are you going to kill Daniel for this bastard?" I looked him up and down. "I really can't remember when I had such a son." "You got the wrong person." I laughed softly. "If you are really my son, you seem to be the bastard." I picked up Isabella by the waist. "I was thinking about doing something auspicious when I get out of the barrier to scare those old guys in the ancestral hall." But he heard the unwilling voice of the young man behind him. "You must come back with me, mother." 8. The turmoil at the coming-of-age banquet was finally settled with the birds paying homage to me. After the banquet, there was another big event. Isabella and Stephen Martin, the young master of the Martin family, have been childhood sweethearts for many years and have developed a mutual affection for each other. A few days ago, Martin's family came to our house to propose marriage. The two families signed the engagement letter and chose an auspicious day. According to the custom of this dynasty, the newlyweds cannot see each other 1 month before the wedding. Isabella is now unmarried and very bored. He kept muttering to me, "Fairy Mother, what do you think Stephen Martin is doing? Fairy Mother, do you think I like him more? Or does he like me more?" I was overwhelmed by the noise. After the coming-of-age party, the little girl was inspired by Daniel and started calling me Mom. I'm used to her calling me sister and sister. For a moment, something just didn't feel right. Every time I want to stop. Isabella looked at me with that aggrieved look again. "Sister Fairy, you know, I have been without a mother since I was a child." That's not wrong. Her biological mother ran away shortly after she was born. She was raised by her grandmother since she was a child, and the term mother was indeed an unfamiliar name to her. Thoughts gradually drifted away. I thought of the kid from Martin's family again. Stephen Martin is also a kid I watched growing up. He was born gentle and refined, without the pampered air of a young boy from a wealthy family. It should be very reliable. As I was thinking this, a very fake cuckoo call suddenly came from outside the window. Isabella's eyes lit up, and like a cat, she followed the sound and crawled to the back wall. The gentle gentleman who had just been praised was squatting on the wall, covered in dust and dirt. But it couldn't conceal the young man's burning spirit. He pulled out an oil paper bag like a magician. He held it in front of Isabella like a treasure. "Miss Brown, this is your favorite osmanthus cake from the north of the city." Isabella glanced at him sideways. He pushed the oil paper bag back expressionlessly. Mr. Stephen, my Miss Brown doesn't want to eat yet. Stephen Martin lowered his head, his ears red as blood. Isabella. He looked left and right, afraid of being seen. Isabella burst out laughing. The afternoon was quiet, and occasionally the wind struck the copper bell under the eaves. The two were startled. They looked at each other and smiled knowingly. It was early summer, the grass and trees were lush, and all the flowers were in full bloom. I brushed past the trumpet creeper in front of the window and smiled softly. It's a good time of the year. 9. On Isabella's wedding day, there was a roar of gongs and drums. Outside the bridal sedan, Stephen Martin was riding a tall horse, looking very high-spirited. In the bridal sedan, Isabella buried her head in my arms like a little piglet, nudging back and forth. Looks like he's sulking. I poked her puffed cheeks. What's going on here? Isabella's voice was muffled. Stephen Martin promised me that he would bring me cakes every day before he married me. But yesterday, he forgot. Bad Stephen Martin, stinky man. I pretended to be serious and rubbed the whining piglet. Then Mother will avenge you. Let's disappear secretly now so he can't find you, okay? Isabella looked up suddenly. No. Stephen Martin would be horrified. Seeing her nervous face, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Okay, I'll listen to you. Our Isabella's happiness is the most important thing. It was already late at night when the wedding was over. I saw Stephen Martin walking into the bridal chamber drunkenly. I squatted on the tree and thought about where to go tonight. Just about to leave. Suddenly I felt a palpitation. I subconsciously looked towards the wedding room lit by candlelight. I have excellent hearing. Even Isabella's mumbling while sitting alone on the wedding bed when Stephen Martin had not returned could be heard. But since Stephen Martin walked in, there has been no sound of anyone talking. I made a prompt decision and chopped the door open with my sword. The barrier shattered with a sound. Inside the room, Stephen Martin was strangling Isabella's neck. What happened? My pupils constricted, and a sword energy went straight to Stephen Martin's throat. Stephen Martin was forced to take a few steps back. Isabella dug her nails into my arms. He is not Shenlang. She vomited blood and even had difficulty breathing. He killed Shenlang. I looked across at Stephen Martin in astonishment, who was wearing a bright red wedding suit. Just as Isabella's words came true. He curled his lips, and the next moment, his face began to change. In the end, the face that was frozen was not unfamiliar to me. The evil boy licked his lips. His eyes swept over the embarrassed Isabella in my arms, and he smiled with his two little fangs showing. How are you? Isabella's eyes were bleeding with hatred. Mother. Crying almost hoarsely. Kill him. Kill him. Mother, he repeated playfully. You keep calling her that, but do you know who she is? Before Isabella could reply, he laughed. 100 years ago, the girl from the Chu family who married the immortal lord was named Emily. And my name is Daniel. I'm Emily's eldest son. The last word fell. Deep in the dusty memories, something is reviving. I have a splitting headache. Isabella raised her tear-stained face and moved her lips. But I couldn't say anything. Daniel looked at Isabella playfully. When your Shenlang died, he was still holding the sweet cake tightly in his hand. How pitiful. Go to the pond behind the house and fish it out. Maybe it hasn't been eaten up by the fish yet. He was very pleased. This is God's punishment. It's your fault. You stole my mother. Isabella looked pale. I clenched her hand and said in a hoarse voice, I will kill you. Daniel smiled contemptuously. An ant dies when it dies. If you were not my biological mother, you would be no different from an ant like this. Besides, if you hadn't denied me, this matter would never have come to this point. Mother, the person who really killed Stephen Martin was you. He licked his lips with satisfaction. His eyes fell on Isabella. As for you, I will kill you. Emily, you can only be my mother. I remember now. All that humiliation, malice, and unbearableness. I remember everything. Daniel. My hair fell on my cheeks. I raised my eyes and smiled gently. Long time no see. You've grown taller. 10. When Matthew arrived, I was sitting in a pool of blood. He used the last bit of his spiritual power to send Isabella back to the demon abyss. Maybe it's contempt. Maybe it's arrogance. Daniel is not defensive against a mere mortal like me. I killed him easily. He believes in the rule that the strong are respected and lowly ants deserve to be crushed to death by the immortal. What I follow is simpler: a life for a life. Creation and destruction are two sides of the same coin. It is not unfair to die at my hands. I looked up from the shadow of the person in front of me. Matthew held out his hand to me, a look of sympathy on his face. Emily, go home with your husband. Go home. I sneered. I killed your evil son. Aren't you afraid that I will kill you again? Matthew's expression remained unchanged. If it weren't for this evil boy, you wouldn't have left in anger. That's really interesting. Daniel is not the only one who harmed me. But the person in front of me was so righteous that he cleared himself of all blame. Seeing that I was unmoved, Matthew paused. The only one I care about is you. As for offspring, Emily, we will have more. I clapped my hands and laughed uncontrollably. Well, the immortal Lord is truly innocent and dignified. Matthew looked at me with an extremely sarcastic expression. They looked away for a moment. Emily. He grabbed my hand, finally showing a hint of pain. I regret it. Roll. Just broke free from his hand. The next moment, a stream of spiritual power hit the back of my neck. Before consciousness sank into darkness, I heard his whispers like sighs. I was wrong in the past. Emily, let's start from the beginning. 11. Return to Yahweh Palace again. This place has completely changed. The former deserted palace has become a white jade tower. The sky is filled with clouds and mist, and the air is filled with fairy music. It's just a fancy cage. Matthew asked me expectantly, Emily, do you like it here? I looked away. I told you, I've already remarried. Does the immortal have a habit of forcibly taking other people's wives? Matthew's face turned cold. Remarry? When will I allow you to remarry? I have granted you immortality and a jade tower. If you were an ordinary woman, you would have burst into tears of gratitude long ago. Emily, you should be content. Seeing that I was unmoved, Matthew tried another tactic to change my mind. He tried to remind me of those days on Earth. In late spring, I picked locust flowers with him. A lotus lantern on a midsummer night. Pick fruits and make wine in autumn, and don't go home until you are drunk. On the winter solstice, listen to the sound of snow knocking on bamboos and chat around the fire. Actually, I remember everything he said that night. But strangely, there was no more fluctuation in my heart. I tried to recall the specific scenes in his description, but I couldn't see Matthew's face clearly. I looked at the person in front of me. At that moment, I felt a little hesitant. In the mortal world, my husband treated me so well. How could he be Matthew? I suddenly felt confused. But if that wasn't Matthew, then who is it? 12. My doubts were answered the day Olivia stepped into Yahweh Palace. After not seeing him for 100 years, his domineering appearance has not changed at all. She looked me up and down. Cut it off with a clean stroke. You are really ruthless. I interrupted her. What are you doing here? Olivia smiled. Of course, I came to fulfill your wish. She said, ever since I disappeared 100 years ago. Matthew regretted it so much that he seemed like a different person. Her marriage to Matthew was already on the agenda. But it ended because of this side issue of mine. As a result, Olivia's original plan to take advantage of the situation to unify the flower world was also shelved. This is her real plan. And she came here today just for this matter. The flower world has been in turmoil for hundreds of years and is already on the verge of falling apart. This matter cannot be delayed any longer. I'll let you go. In exchange, you have to do me a favor. What? Olivia fiddled with the nail polish in her hand with an expressionless face. I want you to help me tamper with Matthew's memory. Let him fall in love with me again and marry me. It was like a thunderclap exploding in my head. I heard my own voice pretending to be calm. Can memory be false? Olivia nodded nonchalantly. Nature. All I need is a drop of your heart's blood. Change the fragments of his memory related to you into me. Long after Olivia left, I woke up from a dream and picked up the teacup, trying to moisten my dry throat. But I found that my hands couldn't stop shaking. Memory can be tampered with. Memory, then, can be deceiving. Is everything I remember completely true? I remembered what Olivia said before she left. She was afraid that I was still unwilling to give up on Matthew, so she told me another thing. Matthew practices the path of ruthlessness. He killed his wife to prove his truth. But he didn't want to kill Olivia. So he retained his memory and came down to earth. And I was just the prey he happened to target. Olivia's scapegoat. If I hadn't been pregnant with Daniel, he would have really killed me. But why would I love such a person so wholeheartedly? Could it be that someone has tampered with my memory? The person I really fell in love with wasn't Matthew. My head was splitting with pain and I forced myself to calm down. There are many monks in the demon abyss who are proficient in strange and unusual skills. They may have a solution. The most urgent task is to leave the ninth heaven first. 13. I agreed to the deal with Olivia. The night she took my heart's blood, left me a token of passage. It was rare that he gave me a relatively sincere smile. Mortal, may you be free. I whispered, may the saint obtain her wish. Yawa Palace was left far behind me. The wind from the ninth heaven brushed past me and whistled away. Old people, old things, all thrown away. Never look back. The teleportation array lit up faintly under my feet. The moment of leaving. The arm was grabbed fiercely. The force was so great that it almost crushed my bones. The man had a sinister look on his face and a frosty brow. Emily, where are you trying to sneak off to? He laughed out of anger. The other hand lifted my chin. It seems that I have been too indulgent to you these days. I was thinking quickly about how to break free. Just at this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded behind him. Let her go. I looked back suddenly. Just then, there came a scholar in blue clothes, with his face covered with silver, walking on the moon. My eyes suddenly widened. Brian is out of quarantine so soon? The next moment, a black demonic energy hit Matthew in the face. He was forced to step back and let me go. Who is coming? The scholar was clearly smiling, but the eyes outside the mask were frighteningly cold. No name, no surname, just a wandering ghost. I came here to take my wife home. Second, to seek revenge. Matthew chuckled. What grudge? The scholar raised his eyes and read each word carefully. The hatred of having my wife taken away, the revenge of having my daughter killed. This hatred is irreconcilable. 14. Matthew frowned. He seemed to recognize the person in front of him. You're not dead. He glanced Brian up and down, his expression knowing. Neither human nor ghost, so unbearable. Brian held me behind him. When I looked up again, I was filled with murderous intent. Fortunately, I am still alive. I listened to their conversation in confusion, with a splitting headache. What are they talking about? In the deepest part of my memory, something seemed to be crumbling. Brian in front of him raised his hand slightly. A huge sword surrounded by black air quickly condensed in front of him. "Brian!" I exclaimed. Brian turned around and smiled reassuringly. "Don't be afraid," he said. "I will kill him with my own hands and then take my wife home." Matthew's eyebrows remained unchanged. White waves roll under my palms. "Do you think you can go back alive today?" Brian raised his hand, and the demonic energy was so strong that the stars lost their luster. When a common man is angry, blood will splatter 5 steps away. How do you know that you are not within these 5 steps? In the black fog that covered the sky, Matthew's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're crazy. With so much demonic energy, you." I swallowed the abyss. Brian smiled indifferently. The giant blade formed by the condensed demonic energy slashed down from the sky. Hundreds of years of hatred, pursuit, and searching are all contained in this sword. My lord, this sword is called immortal slashing. 15. It was like a landslide. Before the huge boom sounded, Brian covered my ears. The smoke and dust blocked out the sun, and everything in front of me was pitch black. I felt his blood-soaked collar and was startled. "Brian." Brian's palm wrapped around mine. He said, "I am here." When the black fog dissipated, Matthew was no longer visible. Brian was laughing while coughing up blood. "It's not that difficult to kill the immortal." He was totally unaware that his blue clothes were stained with blood. Even the exposed skin is almost transparent. He was disappearing little by little. My mind went blank and even my voice was trembling. "Don't die." He looked away for a moment and changed the subject. "Do you remember my promise to show you my face after I'm out of prison? Do you still want to watch?" Seeing that I didn't respond, Brian hurriedly explained. "It's not that I don't want to," he said hoarsely. "I'm just afraid of scaring you." With trembling hands, I took off the silver mask. It was an almost disfigured face. There are scarlet magic patterns winding around, which are eerie and terrifying. But at that moment, I didn't feel afraid. I finally remembered his name. Mu-hung. He is a nobody in this world. He is an ant that can be crushed to death by a single kick from an immortal. But he is also my childhood sweetheart, husband, and my beloved. The tampered memories shattered into pieces. Restored to its original appearance. Mu-hung smiled softly. "Do you still remember? Remember? Before you married Matthew, you were married to someone else. You, a girl from a poor family, married her childhood sweetheart, a scholar. Don't you remember? In late spring, he picked locust flowers with you. Midsummer night is the lotus lantern he made for you with his own hands. In autumn, he and you lie drunk in the maple forest. The winter solstice is when he brushes away the snow from between your brows. Emily was originally Mu-hung's wife, and the thief who tampered with the memory. He killed Mu-hung and pretended to be my husband in an attempt to deceive the heavens. At that time, there's even a tiny baby in my belly. I was shocked and called out a name. Isabella. So, Isabella never grows up, because she was killed before she was born. The hatred of having your wife taken away and the revenge of having your daughter killed. So, that's how it is. Do you know why I named my daughter Isabella? Mu-hung's expression was gentle and sad. He wanted to smile, but it aggravated his internal organs and he started coughing up blood. Isabella, don't forget. Heart Isabella. Isabella doesn't forget. Mu-hung's figure was thinner than the fog. How ironic. I just retrieved him from my memory. Then I will say goodbye to him. Emily. He said hoarsely, please, take your time to forget me. Slow down, fall in love with someone else. The wind blows. The tear marks are cold. I dropped my eyes in numbness. In his arms, there was only a blood-stained blue shirt left. Fragments of light linger around me, comforting me clumsily. Before my eyes, Muheng's appearance as a teenager gradually emerged. His face is as pretty as jade, with white teeth and black eyebrows. It seems like we first met 100 years ago. He looked up and smiled, and I was mesmerized. 16. The wind brings news of flowers, and the rain washes away the spring dust. It's spring again in the south of the Yangtze River. The door of the courtyard creaked. I looked up and saw Isabella sticking half of her head in. "Mother, I'm back." Seeing her excited look, I made a joke. "Have you found Stephen?" When this was mentioned, Isabella's raised eyebrows suddenly drooped. "I found it," but she looked pissed off. "Mother, guess what? Stephen Martin was reborn as a bald donkey in this life. When you see me, don't look at or listen to anything indecent. I just molested him, so what?" Isabella gritted her teeth. "I've been thinking about it. I'm young and beautiful. Do I really have to hang myself on this tree?" Stephen Martin's soul was crushed by Daniel. During these thousands of years, Isabella finally pieced his shattered soul together bit by bit. Who would have thought that as soon as he was reincarnated, this person became a monk? Isabella grumbled, very annoyed. He shouted that he wanted to find new love and forget this bad donkey. I had a hard time holding back my laughter. Isabella noticed the twitching of my lips, screaming in grievance. "Mother, you are making fun of me." "Nothing." I coughed lightly. Mother just had a cramp in her mouth. Isabella didn't believe me. She nestled in my arms. "That's right, Mother." She remembered something and raised her head. "Have you found your father's reincarnation?" I shook my head. "Not yet." In that battle, Muheng killed Matthew with the power of the demonic abyss. However, he was also attacked by the power of the demonic abyss. The soul is scattered and cannot be found anywhere. For thousands of years, I traveled all over the mountains and rivers just to find a way to resurrect. Everyone I met shook their heads and sighed. The last person I found was Olivia. After Matthew's death, as a widow, she inherited everything from Matthew. He unified the flower world with lightning speed and became the new master of the flower world. When I found her, she reclined on the beauty couch. Several handsome young men were feeding her grapes tenderly and carefully. She raised her head lazily, and the juice on the corner of her lips flowed into her collar. "How are you?" As he said this, he instructed a young man to pour me tea. "You're happy." I sighed. "I've been badly hurt." Olivia smiled and said, "Desire brings suffering, while no desire brings strength. Mortals, you still need to practice more. Hear why I came." After a moment's silence, he knocked on her gorgeous crystal stand. "So." She waved and I leaned over to listen. "I'll give you a few handsome boys. After a long time, you will naturally forget him." I was so tired that I just broke the jar into pieces. "That's fine." The words haven't finished yet. A faint fragment of light floated in from nowhere, rubbing against my fingers flatteringly. "Hey!" Olivia raised her eyelids. "After sleeping for so long, you finally wake up? It's good that you're awake. I'm looking for a good husband for your wife. You should also help take a look." I could actually see anxiety from a small ball of white light. Olivia raised her eyebrows slightly. "Well, your deceased husband has been found, right?" Muheng's soul was completely shattered, and he could only piece it together bit by himself. "And all I can do is wait," Olivia added nonchalantly. "If you get tired of waiting, I'll send you a few handsome boys to entertain you." White light. 17. More than 10 years have passed since Muheng's soul reunited and entered the cycle of reincarnation again. The day Isabella and I found her. Suddenly, spring arrives at the peach branches. Isabella wiped her eyes and cooed. "The wind and sand in spring are so strong that it hurts my eyes." Not far away, there was a young man in blue shirt reading in the courtyard. The hem of her sleeve sank, and Isabella's voice became tense. "Is that man Daddy?" I said, "Yes." The scholar was too engrossed in reading, so much so that when the sun set, he never raised his head once. "Mother." Isabella came closer quietly. "I feel like Dad has discovered us." I was depressed and asked, "How come?" When he looked up again, the scholar was gone. Isabella suddenly became quiet. A smiling voice came from behind. "Excuse me, young man." I turned around suddenly and bumped into those clear eyes. Spring is still young. Willows are beginning to sprout. Apricots are beginning to bloom. The scholar lowered his eyebrows and smiled, just like he did back then. "Girl, are you looking for a boy?"